The winter wind howled through the concrete pillars under the old bridge, making the tattered blanket flutter around the young mother and her small daughter. Their breath came out in little white clouds in the freezing air, but they held each other close, sharing what warmth they could find. "Mama, tell me again about our house with the blue door," the little girl whispered, snuggling deeper into her mother's embrace. Her tiny fingers clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit, its fur matted from years of love and tears. The mother smiled, though her heart ached at the memories. Just 2 years ago, she had been teaching music at the local community center, living in a cozy apartment with flowers on the windowsill. Her daughter would sit at their second-hand piano, tiny fingers pressing random keys while she prepared dinner, filling their home with a chaotic but joyful symphony. But life had other plans. Her husband's sudden illness, the mounting hospital bills, and then the final goodbye. It all happened so fast. The medical debt swallowed their savings whole, and soon they found themselves joining the invisible people who lived in the shadows of the big city. Yet even now, huddled under the bridge, the mother refused to let their circumstances dim the light in her daughter's eyes. Every night, she would sing the same lullaby her own mother had sung to her, her voice clear and strong despite their hardships. The melody would float through the air, drawing occasional smiles from other homeless folks who shared their concrete shelter. "The house with the blue door is waiting for us somewhere," she whispered to her daughter, gently stroking her hair. "And until we find it, we'll make music wherever we are. Remember what I always tell you." The little girl nodded sleepily, reciting the words they shared every night. "Music lives in our hearts, not in our house." During the day, they would walk to the local park where the mother would sing while her daughter collected fallen leaves and created pictures with them. Some days, kind strangers would stop to listen, dropping coins or sometimes even food. The mother never begged. She sang with dignity, holding on to the last piece of her former life that nobody could take away. Other homeless people in the area looked out for them too. Old Mr. Lee, who had been living on the streets for 5 years, always saved an extra sandwich from the shelter for the little girl. Mrs. Rodriguez, who slept in the subway station during winter, would watch the child when her mother needed to use the public restroom. They had formed their own little community, bound together by circumstances, but lifted by small acts of kindness. The mother made sure to teach her daughter to be grateful for these moments, to see the beauty in humanity even when life seemed darkest. That night, as the temperature dropped even further, the mother wrapped their only blanket tighter around her sleeping daughter. Her voice, though tired, remained steady as she sang their nightly lullaby. She didn't know that tomorrow would bring a change to their lives, that her voice, carrying years of professional training and a mother's endless love, would reach ears far beyond their bridge. For now, she simply sang, her melody mixing with the city sounds, a gentle reminder that hope, like music, could survive even the coldest nights. Her daughter slept peacefully, dreaming perhaps of the house with the blue door, while above them, the stars twinkled through breaks in the clouds, silent witnesses to a mother's unwavering love. The morning sun barely reached the underground subway platform, but its faint warmth was enough to draw a small smile from the young mother as she set up her usual spot. Her daughter sat cross-legged beside her, carefully arranging their few possessions: 3 broken crayons, a tattered notebook, and the ever-present stuffed rabbit that had become more gray than white. The rush hour crowd moved like a river around them, most people too busy checking their phones or watching the arrival times to notice the pair. The mother smoothed down her daughter's hair, trying to make it presentable with just water and her fingers. Despite their circumstances, she always tried to keep them both as neat as possible. "Ready for our morning song?" she asked her daughter, who nodded eagerly. Their morning ritual had become something special, a moment when they could pretend they were just street performers sharing their art with the world, not a homeless family struggling to survive. Her voice, when it finally rose above the subway noise, caught a few commuters by surprise. The pure, trained notes of Moon River floated through the stale underground air, transforming the mundane morning into something magical. Her daughter swayed beside her, adding her own quiet harmony to the chorus, something she'd learned simply from hearing the song so many times. A businessman who always caught the 8:15 train paused in his rush, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. He'd been hurrying past this spot for weeks, but today, something in the song made him stop. He watched as the little girl drew pictures in her notebook, stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. The mother's voice carried years of professional training, yet held something more precious: the warmth of genuine emotion. Other regular commuters had their own small rituals with the singing pair. The kind lady who sold newspapers would sometimes slip them a paper and a hot chocolate on cold mornings. An elderly man who walked with a cane would sit on the nearby bench every Tuesday, closing his eyes to listen while sharing his packed lunch with them. The daughter spent her mornings creating art on any blank paper she could find. Sometimes she drew their dream house with its blue door. Other times, she sketched the faces of people who showed them kindness: the station cleaner who pretended not to see them when it was raining outside, the teenage barista who accidentally made extra hot chocolate and couldn't possibly throw it away. Around noon, when the crowd thinned, the mother would teach her daughter simple music theory using the echoes of their voices in the tunnel. She drew musical notes on scraps of paper, showing her how to read them, keeping alive the skills she once taught in a proper classroom. The subway platform had become their unconventional music school. "Look, Mama," her daughter would exclaim whenever the notes came out just right, her face glowing with pride. These moments made the mother's heart both soar and ache. Her child was learning, growing, showing such talent, yet doing so in a place never meant to be a classroom. Some days were harder than others. There were times when security guards would ask them to move, when rude passengers would make unkind comments, or when the cold from the concrete floor would seep through their thin clothes. But the mother never let these moments stop their music. She'd simply gather their few belongings, take her daughter's hand, and find another spot to fill with their songs. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the subway grates above, the mother noticed a young woman lingering nearby, phone in hand. She'd seen many people film them before, some out of curiosity, others with less kind intentions. But something about this woman's gentle smile felt different. Unknown to them, this moment would become the turning point in their story, though for now, they simply continued their daily routine, their voices echoing through the underground tunnels of the city. The mother squeezed her daughter's hand as they started another song, their voices blending together in perfect harmony. Above them, trains rumbled and life rushed by, but in their small corner of the subway platform, they had created their own world, one where music could turn a cold platform into a concert hall, and where love could make even the hardest days feel a little more bearable. The November morning brought an unusual chill to the subway station. The mother pulled her thin jacket tighter, watching her breath form little clouds in the cold air. Her daughter had fallen asleep on her lap, exhausted from their early morning walk to find a warmer spot. The stuffed rabbit was tucked securely under the child's arm, its worn ears peeking out from under their shared blanket. Looking down at her sleeping daughter's peaceful face, the mother felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Without thinking, she began to sing "Over the Rainbow," not for coins or attention, but simply because her heart needed the comfort of the familiar melody. Her voice, though tired from the cold, carried the weight of dreams still unfulfilled but not forgotten. "Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high," she sang softly, gently stroking her daughter's hair. Her voice cracked slightly on the higher notes, but the raw emotion made the song even more beautiful. "There's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby." A young woman in a bright yellow coat stopped a few feet away, drawn by the pure emotion in the mother's voice. Quietly, she took out her phone and began recording. The mother noticed but kept singing, her focus entirely on her sleeping child. This wasn't a performance. It was a moment of pure love between a mother and daughter, accidentally captured on camera. The woman in yellow stayed until the end of the song, wiping tears from her eyes before continuing to her train. That evening, she posted the video on her social media account with a simple caption: "I witnessed something beautiful today. A mother's love knows no bounds." The video spread like wildfire across the internet. People were touched by the genuine emotion in the mother's voice, the peaceful expression on the sleeping child's face, and the contrast between their circumstances and the hope in the lyrics. Comments flooded in from around the world. "The way she looks at her daughter while singing, my heart can't take it. This is real talent. How did they end up there? Someone needs to help them. This isn't right. That voice belongs in a concert hall, not a subway station." By midnight, the clip had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. News websites picked up the story, calling it the subway lullaby. People began sharing their own stories of hardship and hope in the comments, creating a chain of compassion that spread far beyond the original video. The next morning, the mother and daughter went about their usual routine, unaware that their moment had touched millions. A few more people than usual stopped to listen, some holding up phones, trying to confirm if this was the same pair from the viral video. The mother noticed the extra attention but kept singing as she always had, from her heart. But not all attention was welcome. By afternoon, a man with an expensive camera had gotten too close, trying to film her daughter's face. The mother quickly gathered their few belongings, holding her child close as they moved to a different station. They spent that night in a shelter, the mother lying awake, worried about what all this attention might mean for them. Yet even in her concern, she couldn't stop herself from singing their nightly lullaby. Her daughter snuggled close in the shelter bed, yawning as she asked, "Do you think more people liked our music today, Mama?" The mother smiled softly, tucking the blanket around them. "I think today our music reminded people that love is the most beautiful song of all." She didn't mention her worries about the cameras or the attention. Instead, she held her daughter closer and hummed quietly, letting the melody soothe them both to sleep. Unknown to them, in a warm office across the city, someone who understood both music and struggle was watching their video with tears in his eyes. He remembered a competition from years ago, a young music teacher whose voice had moved the entire audience to tears. As he replayed the subway video, he knew without doubt it was the same voice, the same soul-touching quality that couldn't be taught or bought. In the shelter that night, mother and daughter slept peacefully, unaware that their simple moment of love had set in motion events that would change their lives forever. Above the city, a full moon shone brightly, its light touching both the highest penthouses and the humblest shelters, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful melodies can come from the most unexpected places. The Music Academy director sat in his dimly lit office, replaying the viral video for the 20th time that evening. The sound of that voice transported him back 10 years to a sunny afternoon when a young music teacher had stood on his competition stage and moved the entire audience to tears with her performance. He pulled out an old competition program from his desk drawer, his hands slightly shaking as he flipped through its worn pages. There she was, the winner from a decade ago. The photograph showed a confident young woman holding a trophy, her eyes bright with promise. The same eyes he now saw in the viral video, though weathered by hardship but still holding that spark when she looked at her daughter. "It has to be her," he whispered to himself, reaching for his phone. His fingers hovered over the keypad before he made the call. "Hello. Yes, I need to speak with the news director. It's about the singing homeless woman from the viral video. I think I know who she is." Within hours, the story took on a new dimension. Local news channels picked up the piece. Award-winning musician now homeless. A story of loss and hope. The headlines spread quickly, each news outlet adding another layer to the narrative. Some focused on the tragedy of talent lost to circumstance, others on the resilience of the human spirit. Morning shows began running segments about the video. The competition footage from 10 years ago was aired alongside the subway recording. Music experts analyzed both performances, amazed by how the voice had maintained its technical perfection despite years of hardship. But more than that, they noted how it had gained something rare. A depth of emotion that only real-life experience could bring. The Academy director's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Former students called, claiming they remembered her from music workshops. Local musicians offered to help with the search. Even small coffee shops near subway stations promised to keep an eye out. "The thing that strikes me most," the director told a reporter, his voice thick with emotion, "is that she never lost her gift. Living on the streets, struggling to survive, yet she kept singing. Not just singing, teaching her daughter too. That shows an extraordinary spirit." Social media exploded with people sharing their own encounters with the mother and daughter. The newspaper lady from the subway station posted about the hot chocolates she'd shared with them. The elderly man wrote about their Tuesday meetings and the little girl's drawings. Each story painted a picture of dignity in the face of hardship. "Last week, she taught my daughter to hum Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star," wrote a woman who often passed through the station. "I offered to pay her, but she just smiled and said music should be shared freely. I never knew she was once a professional musician." The city seemed to come alive with purpose. People began leaving notes at subway stations. "We're looking for you. We want to help." Community boards filled with posters showing screenshots from the viral video. Local radio stations played the competition recording, hoping she might hear it somewhere. But finding someone in a city of millions proved challenging, especially someone who had learned to stay invisible. The mother and daughter had already moved away from their usual spots, wary of the increasing attention. They found temporary shelter in a church basement, where the mother continued to sing her daughter to sleep each night, unaware that her voice had become the talk of the city. The academy director spent his evenings visiting different subway stations, hoping to catch a familiar melody. He carried with him a proposal, a teaching position, a chance for a new start. But more than that, he carried hope. Hope that music, which had brought them together once before, would somehow lead him to them again. In his office, he kept the competition video playing on loop, its melody mixing with the sounds from the viral clip. 2 performances, 10 years apart, telling the story of one extraordinary journey. As night fell over the city, he made a promise to himself. This time, when he found her, he wouldn't just celebrate her talent. He would make sure she never had to lose her place in the music world again. Meanwhile, somewhere in the vast city, a mother sang her daughter to sleep, her voice carrying the same perfect notes that had once won her accolades. But now, each note carried something more valuable than any trophy: the unwavering love of a mother who had kept music alive in their hearts through the darkest of times. The city buzzed with energy as the surge entered its second week. Local news vans patrolled the streets, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal trees. Every subway musician was approached with hopeful questions. Every mother and child duo caught the attention of passers-by. The mother and daughter had found temporary refuge in a small shelter on the outskirts of town. They shared a narrow bed, their few possessions tucked neatly underneath. The little girl clutched her stuffed rabbit, now adorned with a new ribbon given by a kind shelter volunteer. "Why did we have to leave our subway spot, Mama?" the little girl asked one evening, drawing pictures with colored pencils donated by the shelter. "I miss Mr. Lee and his funny stories." The mother sighed softly, watching her daughter draw. The paper showed their old spot under the bridge, filled with stick figures of the people who had shown them kindness. "Sometimes, little one, we need to be careful when too many people start noticing us. Not everyone has good intentions." But life at the shelter brought its own kind of magic. The mother found herself teaching simple songs to the other children there. Soon, the shelter's dining hall would fill with young voices singing "You Are My Sunshine" during breakfast. The sound drew smiles from even the most tired faces. Meanwhile, across the city, the surge continued. Radio stations played her competition recording every hour, hoping she might hear it somewhere. "If you're listening," one DJ said, his voice warm with sincerity, "please know that we want to help. Your music has touched so many hearts." Local coffee shops put up posters with screenshots from the viral video. Bakeries offered free coffee and pastries for any information leading to finding them. The city's music community mobilized, sharing stories of past encounters and possible sightings. "I saw them last Tuesday," an old street vendor told a news reporter. "The little girl showed me her drawings, and the mother sang Amazing Grace. Most beautiful thing I've ever heard." But by the time the news crew arrived at the spot, mother and daughter were long gone. At the shelter, the mother tried to maintain their routine. Every night, she would sing their special lullaby, her voice carrying through the shelter's thin walls. Other residents would stop to listen, finding comfort in the melody. Some recorded snippets on their phones, not realizing they were listening to the voice that the whole city was searching for. One evening, a young volunteer at the shelter was scrolling through social media during her break. The viral video played automatically on her feed, and she froze, coffee cup halfway to her lips. The voice from her phone matched the one she'd been hearing every evening for the past week. The volunteer wrestled with what to do. She saw how the mother protected her daughter, how they found peace in their small corner of the shelter. But she also knew about the search, about the opportunity waiting for them. That night, she made a decision that would change everything. She approached the mother after dinner, while the little girl was drawing with other children. "I know who you are," she said gently. "And I know someone who's been looking for you. Someone who remembers you from your competition days." The mother's hands trembled as she folded laundry, her voice barely a whisper. We've been running from all the attention. My daughter, she's all I have. I can't risk anything happening to her." The volunteer pulled out her phone, showing her the news coverage, the Music Academy director's interviews, the community's outpouring of support. "Sometimes," she said softly, "running away isn't the same as keeping safe. Sometimes help is real." Tears filled the mother's eyes as she watched the videos. She saw her old competition footage, heard her younger self singing with such hope. She saw the comments from people who remembered her teaching days, the students whose lives she had touched. That night, as her daughter slept soundly beside her, the mother made the hardest decision of her life. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running. Maybe music, which had sustained them through their darkest days, was finally leading them toward the light. The volunteer sent a message to a number she'd found online. "I found them," she wrote simply. "They're safe. They're ready." As the message delivered with a soft ping, somewhere in the city, a phone lit up in a Music Academy office, and hope took on a new melody. The shelter's community room buzzed with excitement that morning. Children sat in a semicircle on a worn carpet, their eyes fixed on the mother as she taught them to sing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." Her daughter sat closest to her, beaming with pride as she helped the younger children learn the words. "Remember," the mother said softly, "music isn't just about the right notes. It's about what you feel in your heart when you sing them." Her voice was gentle as she guided a small boy through a difficult part, her patience evident in every word. The children's voices blended together, some slightly off-key, but all filled with joy. A little girl in a red sweater finally hit a challenging note, and her face lit up with achievement. The mother knelt beside her, offering quiet encouragement that made the child's smile grow even brighter. None of them noticed the shelter volunteer leading two men into the room. The Music Academy director stood in the doorway, frozen by the scene before him. Here was the voice he'd been searching for, not just singing, but teaching, transforming a simple shelter room into a place of wonder. He watched as she moved from child to child, offering gentle corrections and warm praise. Her daughter followed along, showing the younger ones how to breathe properly, techniques she'd clearly learned from watching her mother. Despite their circumstances, the mother hadn't just survived. She kept teaching, kept sharing her gift. The singing paused as one of the younger children spotted the visitors and pointed. The mother looked up, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Recognition flickered across her face as she saw the academy director, a face from her past life, from the competition that felt like a lifetime ago. "Keep practicing the breathing exercises," she told the children quietly, giving her daughter's shoulder a reassuring squeeze before standing to greet the visitors. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. The director stepped forward, his eyes bright with emotion. "I've been looking for you," he said simply. "When I saw that video, I knew it was you. Your voice, it hasn't changed. If anything, it's grown more beautiful." The mother glanced back at the children, who were still practicing their breathing exercises under her daughter's careful guidance. "Life has been our greatest teacher," she replied softly. "Music, it kept us going when we had nothing else." "You never stopped teaching," the director observed, watching the children. "Even here." "Music doesn't belong to concert halls," she said, her voice growing stronger. "It belongs everywhere. These children, they need it just as much as anyone, maybe more." The shelter volunteer who had contacted the director stepped forward then, explaining how she'd recognized the mother's voice from the viral video. As they talked, the children continued their lesson, their sweet voices providing a soundtrack to this moment of change. The director shared his proposal, a teaching position at the academy, working specifically with underprivileged children. "Your experience, your heart for teaching, your understanding of music's power to heal and unite, we need that. These past weeks, watching you through that video, seeing how you've touched people's lives, it's exactly what our community program needs." Tears welled in the mother's eyes as she listened. Her daughter had wandered over, slipping her small hand into her mother's. The stuffed rabbit, ever present, was tucked under her other arm. "Will we still get to sing with the other children?" her daughter asked, looking at the group still practicing their breathing exercises. The director knelt down to the little girl's level. "You and your mother could help us bring music to children all over the city, not just here, but everywhere." He looked up at the mother. "Your story, your talent, your dedication, it could open doors for so many others." The mother watched her daughter's face light up at the possibility. She thought of all the nights they'd spent singing under bridges and in subway stations, how music had been their shelter when they had no other. Now, perhaps it could be their bridge to a new life. Around them, the children's voices rose again, slightly stronger now, more confident. They sang the song she'd been teaching them, their young voices carrying hope and possibility in every note. The mother squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling the warmth of the moment wash over them. Tomorrow would bring paperwork and plans, challenges and changes. But right now, in this shelter room filled with music, something beautiful was beginning. The mother lifted her voice to join the children's chorus, and this time she sang not just of rainbows, but of dreams that might finally come true. 6 months later, the mother stood in front of a classroom at the music academy, her heart full as she watched 20 young students practice their vocal exercises. Her daughter sat at a small desk near the window, doing her homework between classes. The stuffed rabbit, now cleaned and repaired, still kept her company. "Remember to breathe from your diaphragm," she guided gently, demonstrating the technique she'd once taught in subway stations. "Music comes from your whole body, not just your throat." A little boy in the back row finally got it right, and his face lit up with pure joy. The classroom itself told a story of transformation. Donations had poured in after their story went viral, but the mother had insisted that most of it go toward creating a scholarship program. "Let's help other families find their way through music," she'd said. Now, half her students were children from shelters and struggling families, their tuition fully covered. During lunch breaks, she'd often find her daughter teaching younger kids simple songs in the courtyard, just as they used to do under the bridge. "You're a natural teacher," she told her daughter one day, watching her help a smaller child learn "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." "I learned from the best, Mama," her daughter replied with a bright smile, the kind that now came easily and often. Their new apartment wasn't big, but it had something they'd dreamed of for so long, a blue door. They'd painted it themselves on their first weekend there, laughing as they got more paint on their clothes than the door. Inside, a donated piano filled their small living room with music every evening. The mother never forgot the people who'd helped them during their hardest times. Every Tuesday, she and her daughter volunteered at their old shelter, running music classes for the residents. Mr. Lee, the kind old man who used to share his sandwiches, now sat in on these classes, his weathered face peaceful as he listened to the children sing. The viral video had done more than change their lives. It had started a conversation about homelessness in their city, about the hidden talents and untold stories of people living on the streets. The Music Academy had launched a new outreach program, bringing music education to shelters across the city. One evening, as mother and daughter walked home from the academy, they passed their old subway station. The mother paused, listening to a young woman singing while her child drew pictures nearby. Without hesitation, she dropped some money in their cup and sat down to talk with them. That night, 2 more students joined her scholarship program. Back in their apartment, as they prepared dinner together, the mother watched her daughter arranging flowers in a vase. Simple daisies from the corner shop, but they brightened the whole room. "Do you miss singing in the subway?" she asked softly. Her daughter thought for a moment, then shook her head. "Not really, but I'm glad we did it. It helped us remember that music is everywhere, even in sad places." She paused, then added, "And now we can help other people find their songs too." The mother pulled her daughter close, remembering all the cold nights they'd huddled together, all the times when their only comfort had been their shared songs. Now, those memories didn't bring pain anymore. They reminded her of their strength, their unbreakable bond. Later that evening, as they sat at their piano, the mother began to play "Over the Rainbow," the song that had changed everything. But this time, it wasn't a prayer for escape or a dream of somewhere better. It was a celebration of here and now, of promises kept and dreams realized. Their voices filled their small apartment, floating out through the blue door and into the city beyond. Somewhere out there, other mothers were singing their children to sleep in shelters and subway stations. But now there was hope, hope that music could build bridges, open doors, and light the way home. As the last notes faded, the mother looked at her daughter and saw their whole journey in her smile. They had started with nothing but their voices and their love for each other. Now they had a home, a purpose, and a chance to help others find their way through music. "Ready for bed?" she asked, closing the piano lid. Her daughter nodded, hugging her stuffed rabbit close. can we sing our special lullaby?" The mother smiled, knowing that even with all the changes in their lives, some things would always stay the same. As they got ready for bed, their voices joined in the familiar melody, not because they needed comfort anymore, but because singing together had become their way of saying, "I love you." That night, as her daughter slept peacefully in her own bed, in their own home, the mother stood by the blue door and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe. Their song had led them home, and now it was helping others find their way too. Sometimes, she realized, the most beautiful miracles start with a simple melody and a mother's love.